2004 to talk to students and survey them, to ask what's the number one thing, the number two thing, the number three thing that would cause you to use the libraries more often. Open at night, open longer hours, open on weekends. Number one answer for kids, they wanted books in their mother tongue. That seems like a giant no-brainer. The issue is the vacuum. The for-profit publishers are not publishing books in the mother tongue. So I looked at that and thought, what would my childhood be like if I hadn't had Dr. Seuss books, and if they weren't in English? If somebody had given me a book when I was a kid in Azerbaijani, I probably would not have become literate. What is it like for kids today if they don't have Goodnight Moon or Harry Potter? Well, in 2004, we applied to the Skoll Foundation for seed funding to become a local language publisher. And it was great. A lot of funders told us all the reasons things wouldn't work. We have no expertise, we have no experience, yada, yada, yada. Skoll took a risk and gave us the seed funding to publish our first 10 books in the Nepalese language. The program very quickly spread to Sri Lanka, to Vietnam, to Cambodia. Many of you may know that we now even have children's writers writing books, authors, teenagers who write books like Baby Fish Goes to School in Sri Lanka. And we thought about this in 2004, and we asked ourselves, we kind of scratched our chin, and asked ourselves, what would be the best way to get books in the kids' mother tongue? We talked to a lot of people who told us, just take English books. Take English language books and overlay the local script on that English language book. And we were like, yeah, but I mean, then kids in Zambia are going to have a book about the white Christmas with the caroling and the eggnog in front of the fireplace and snowflakes and be like, what up with the white Christmas? I don't really understand that. So we thought we really want to make sure that kids have books in their mother tongue. So Dinesh in Nepal, the heroic co-founder, went out and found a group called the Nepali Society for Children's Literature. We don't know what they've been doing all those years, because they haven't been producing much children's literature. But when Dinesh told them we're going to pay $300 to the artist and $300 to the author for the best ideas, we had 67 manuscript submissions in the first month. So the authors and the artists were saying to us, it's not about where have we been, it's where has the NGO world been, not challenging us to become the Dr. Seuss of Nepal. We'll roll the videotape forward. From small things, big things often grow. The acorn turns into an oak tree. We've now published 875 original titles using local authors and local artists. So what I want to show you here very briefly are just 50 of these titles. So I want us 50 titles in 50 seconds, right? I want you to, for 1 minute, just reboot your brain and pretend that you're an 11-year-old boy in post-apartheid South Africa in a township, or an 8-year-old girl in post-Khmer Rouge Cambodia, and one day your library opens and you don't know what to expect, and you walk in and here's what you see. Ready? Enjoy. So what do you think? Have we found the Dr. Seuss and the J.K. Rowling of the developing world? I know many of you are worried about the plight of the lost baby elephant, so I just want to assure you that all of our books have happy endings, okay? So don't go home stressed out. The elephant does find its mother. And for us, you know, our happy ending is twofold. One is that, as Dennis mentioned, Rinrud was given, actually nominated by Professor Reimers from Harvard Graduate School of Education for UNESCO's Confucius Prize for Literacy for our local language publishing program. And what UNESCO recognized was not just the scale of the program, over 8 million books printed, but also the local nature of it. Local authors, local artists, local editors. That's the energy that exists across the world. We just have to unleash it. And one of the key things to remember is the importance of delegating, delegating, delegating. A lot of social entrepreneurs are not good at building out a coalition and delegating to it. If you think about it, if we tried to keep tight control over this program and do it all out of our San Francisco headquarters, we probably would not be at 50 titles today. What we've done instead is we've empowered hundreds of local people to become the Dr. Seuss or the J.K. Rowling of their country. And we're going to keep moving on this. This year we're going to publish our 1,000th original title. And so the lesson there is you think you're going to become the Andrew Carnegie of the developing world, you find an unmet need, you also at the same time become the Dr. Seuss of the developing world. And I often joke that Room to Read is now the biggest children's publisher you've never heard of, because we're publishing in these otherwise overlooked languages. So let me run through my last couple of, I think, things I've learned over the years, then we'll open it up to Q&A. One thing I've learned is that the best innovations, like that local language publishing program, like the Challenge Grant program, often don't come from the ivory tower. They don't come from the top of the pyramid or the top of the hierarchy. They often come from the actual coalface, out where people are working. Many of you may know, if you read the second book, the story from Bangladesh of all the kids who live on these really marginalized pieces of land, the chars, these river islands, which are the worst place in the world to live if you're Bangladeshi, because the ground is really silty and the water is constantly challenging you because all that snow melt comes down and the Himalayan snow melt combines with the monsoon rains. And these people are literally not able to have infrastructure on their islands because they're constantly changing. Well, Zaki Hassan, our country director, went out and surveyed 13 different islands and could not find a single woman who had finished secondary school. Not one. And the main reason for that was that during the dry season, all the kids could walk to school. But during the monsoon season, for several months, they couldn't get across a raging river that was 3, 4, or 5 kilometers wide. Well, what are you going to do about that? Well, Zaki was very smart. He went out and talked to a friend of his who ran a healthcare NGO. And he told Zaki about a thing called the river ambulance, where anybody who lived on a char, and there's actually 5 million people in Bangladesh who live on these islands in the middle of the river, could text a message to say they were sick or their mother was sick, and a river ambulance would come out. So Zaki and his team came up with this awesome innovation. Like many innovations, it was low tech, it was immediately deployable, and it's deployable at scale. And that, of course, is the boat to read. And the boat to read was a very, very simple idea. It was, let's send boats out to the islands during the monsoon season and tell every single girl, don't not go to school. We're going to be able to get you to school. So it's kind of like a school bus, but it floats. Now, Zaki ran into a problem because some local community leaders said, well, you're helping the girls, but what about the boys? And Zaki was in a quandary because basically the funder had funded our girls' education programs. This was supposed to be a program that helped girls. But he was caught up, like many of our team members. He was very entrepreneurial, very clever. He thought on his feet. And he said, okay, here's the deal. For the boat to read, we now have 3 of them. The girls are going to be like the business class passengers on the airplane. They can board first. And then when there's extra room left over, we're going to bring the boys on. So it became this shared victory. We're actually able to help the boys along with the girls because Zaki was thinking on his feet. I think it's also important to note that in this case, I think Zaki was one of those leaders who was going to basically ask for forgiveness rather than asking for permission. If you can imagine that if he'd gone into a meeting and said, I need to ask for permission to do this thing, we need to run it up through 3 layers of da-da-da-da, probably somebody would have told him all the reasons it was a bad idea. And I'm not saying the boat to read is the best idea in human history, but boy, I loved it because it was like low tech, it was immediately deployable, it was not expensive, and it was a great way to help a lot of kids very, very quickly. The 8th thing I want to talk about relates to the boat to read, and I think this is really important when talking to university audiences. I did 2 speeches at Harvard today, and I spent a little bit of time on this. Sometimes I think when you talk about innovation, people tend to think that innovation has to be whizzy and high-tech. And I'm here to tell you it doesn't have to be that way at all. How many of you read Animal Farm by George Orwell? You know about the whole thing where the pigs are like 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. And I think sometimes the technology world and the academic world tend to treat low-tech as being bad and high-tech as being good. And I think that's very much of a false dichotomy we have to get around. Some of the best innovations are low-tech, because often low-tech is inexpensive, it is immediately deployable, and it's massively scalable. And this, I think, is an important thing to stress, because if you go out to the rural parts of Cambodia, the rural parts of India, the rural parts of South Africa, you often can't find electricity. You often can't find a cell phone signal. You certainly cannot find a well-maintained Wi-Fi network. So how are you going to be able to help kids if you don't have solutions that can be deployed? And I'm not saying that I'm anti-technology. We use a lot of technology in running Room to Read. I'm just trying in every single speech to remind people that just because it's low-tech doesn't mean it's bad. A book does not need to be rebooted. A book does not need to have the operating system upgraded, and a book does not degrade in value over time like technology does. Best of all, books are a single-purpose device. They don't beep at you or tweet at you or post at you. The kid can get into the book and just read it. Finally, our local English publishing program, on average, it's $1 equals one book. So it's a very, very, very inexpensive way to change the world. I often say that Room to Read, it's not that we're Luddites, we're simply pragmatists. The day that there's technology that works, we'll be hopefully one of the biggest deployers of it. But we have to make sure we don't get caught up in thinking that we should apologize to the world if we don't have solutions that are going to make the cover of Wired magazine. Final 2 points. Many of you may know this from my book. When I set out with Room to Read, it was this thing where I felt very lonely and felt very vulnerable. So I'd given up my status and my income, my regular paycheck, my stock options. And one day Sunisha, our founding country director for India, told me a quote, which he said, the quote's from an Urdu poet, who said he set off alone across the desert at night feeling lonely. And at one point he looked back and he saw the lights and he realized he was now leading a caravan. And that was always the goal at Room to Read. I've often said I do not